the summary to help Michelle and I to compile all that.
Hmm? I'm on air.
All right. And the questions are in the chat for everyone to take a look at.
Okay. All right, friends, I'm going to start us with prayer, and then I'm going to ask Bishop Sandy to give us just to get us started and give her time to talk to you a little bit. Jeffrey, myself, and our wonderful bishop has been working together already in deep discussions about the topic that we are about to discuss. So let's just start in prayer because that's always a good place to start, right? All right, let's be in prayer. Creator God, we are so thankful. We are thankful for this technology that allows us to communicate with our siblings across our conference. We are thankful for all of our siblings that were able to join us this midday for this vital conversation as we move into the future of the United Methodist Church. You were with John Wesley. You were with Susanna Wesley. You were with Charles. You were with the Wesley family in the very beginnings of the Methodist movement. And now be with us. Help us to vision a future that we possibly could never vision, could never think of, and help us to dream bigger and to dream more like Jesus dreamt of this time in our lives. And so, as we move forward with the questions before us and we hear from our bishop, be with Jeffrey and I also as we continue to be delegates, the lead delegates, lay and clergy, working together to just bring the good news and to build a future where everybody belongs, everybody is heard, and everybody matters. In Jesus' mighty name, amen.
Amen. Amen.
Bishop
Amen.
Sandy.
Sure. Let me just say, I just wanted to get on and to say hello to everyone and to thank you for, again, as to second Michelle's and Jeffrey's gratitude for your taking time out of your day to worry and talk about the Book of Discipline. What a funny thing to do, right? My grandniece, who some of you got to see and meet on Sunday, who is just turned 9. Proclaimed to me on our last family meal before I moved up here. She says, Nana, I need my own book of discipline. And I thought, you're 9 years old, child. She's, but I need to know. And she says, I know you're going to be serving for a quadrennium. So I thought it's pretty good that my 9-year-old grandniece already has got some Methodist stuff for her. And she wants a book of discipline. So I do think what I loved about that was the sense that it's we can kind of poo-pah it sometimes, but there are some things that are quite good in it for us, and I think it got a lot better after General Conference. As you know, I'm glad I was still a delegate and not sitting at the council bishops table, so that I got to be a part of that work to do the transformation that we have many of us been working on for a long time, and. Uh, we are moving into a time when there are some things that will opens up the our rules to include all God's people, makes the table wide and gives us the opportunity to really see how God's Spirit is moving through us and in us and inviting us into a fuller expression of making sure that all God's people have not only a seat at the table, but that because they already had a seat at the table. Because it's God's table, it's not ours. So we have a chance now to live into that work. But there was between the two things that the delegation will be helping to lead the annual conference through over these next few months. One is around the Journal Book of Discipline, and to try to make this a collaborative effort. People in every annual conference were in charge of trying to gather these kind of opportunities for people to speak. So the funny thing is, I was the person assigned to CalPAC to do that, and so I got elected bishop, so I got out of the job. But so
Now
they
our bishop can do all the work for us.
so so I'm really grateful for Jeffrey and Micheal leading this charge here. But the ability to receive input and across the whole denomination on this means it becomes more of our book, right? We're able to think through what does it look like? What are the changes that feel right? And of course, the second big thing that we'll be doing soon is on the regionalization. And what does that mean? Because that's going to make major shift in the book of discipline, right? Because there are going to be things that are now going to be adaptable for us that have, if it gets adopted, that have not been adaptable for us. They've been adaptable by central conferences, but not by the church in the jurisdiction. So it's an exciting time of change. The changes we make now won't be the last changes we make, because it'll depend on, if regionalization is ratified. Then when we meet again in 4 more years, there'll be more changes, which is right and good. It should continue to adapt and help us fit, so it doesn't become a constraining book, but rather an opportunity to equip us in a way that's an open book, right? That becomes a little bit more permission given, and it's more adaptable, more nimble, more flexible. And so those are the kinds of things that I think I'm excited to see what will happen over this next season. So I just wanted to say thank you again for your time, your effort, your energy, your interest. And take these questions back to your lay people and to congregations, and because there's still time to gather stuff. So hopefully these questions will spark in you an opportunity to have conversations at the places that you serve, and the people that you work with and are in ministry with, so that it becomes an important guiding book for all of us. So with that, I would say thank you again, and I'm going to sign off to go to another meeting, if that's okay, Micheal and Jeffrey. And we'll be in touch more. And I look forward to doing this work with you.
Thank you, Bishop.
Thank you, Bishop.
So now I'm going to turn this portion of our discussion, the beginning of our discussion, over to Brother Jeffrey Kuan, who I have had the privilege of working with and learning from, quite honestly, as a first-time delegate. And he's been doing a lot of the on-the-ground work behind the scenes. He's been really busy traveling, and so it's I think a good place to start to hear from him. Jeffrey?
Thank you, Sister Micheal. I love the story that Bishop Sandy just told about her grandniece Melody, and it reminds me of what Adam Hamilton had often say, how he became United Methodist. And for discipline, book of discipline geeks like some of us, Adam had told the story that it was reading the book of discipline that made him a Methodist. So the book of discipline has value, definitely for some people. I have been serving on the Standing Committee on Central Conference Matters for many years, and as part of that, have been working on the General Book of Discipline. It has every meeting that we have had as a standing committee, we had scheduled time to work on that. And as Bishop mentioned, some of you may know, many of you probably do not know, that there are parts of the Book of Discipline that are adaptable by the central conferences. Again, remember that there are parts of the book of discipline that are quote unquote untouchable. It can only be revised by the general conference, and many parts can only be revised through the ratification process. So those are parts that are not subject to any changes and adaptability. But there are some parts, particularly in what we refer to as Part 6. There are parts that have been adapted by central conferences for a long time. In the different regions, for example, in Europe, the Book of Discipline is much smaller. When they translate, they adapt, they remove parts that are not relevant for them, adapted them. Where does that put us? Those of us in the US, even at this point in time, there is no ability, no no allowance for the U.S. to adapt any part of the Book of Discipline. In the sense, the Book of Discipline, what we have in the Book of the Discipline is what we have. But as Bishop mentioned, the actions of the past General Conference back at the end of April and early May can begin to shift a lot of things. Regionalization, which we will be talking about in the coming weeks too, as we move toward our own annual conference session. The passage of regionalization at the General Conference, it's creating a path for the U.S. Church to be on the same footing as the church in the African continent, in Europe, and in the Philippines. It will allow, making all these regions will allow each region to look at those sections in the Book of Discipline that can be adaptable, to adapt it for our own contextual mission and ministry. And that's the reason why the Standing Committee over the years began to take that section on organization and administration and begin to pull it apart and make it into two sections. A new part 6, where the proposal is to retain all the related disciplinary matters that cannot be adapted by any region, any central conference, and pull out those that can be adaptable or have been adaptable for decades and decades already. Create that section 7, create that part 7, an additional part on organization and administration. And what is adaptable there can be adaptable by the central conferences, which also means that if regionalization is passed through the ratification process by all the annual conferences, that section can also be adapted by the church in the United States. Let me just give an example before I turn it back to Sister Micheal to guide our conversation. Currently, in our Book of Discipline, if you go to paragraph 315 and particularly 316, for those of you who are ordained, you would know that all of you need a Master of Divinity for ordination, right? If you read that section in that the new proposed General Book of Discipline under ordained ministry, that section 316 relating to academic qualification, for example, is not there. That has been removed and will be placed in a new part 7, because educational requirements varies from central conferences, regions to regions. In the continent of Africa, for the majority of all the conferences there, the basic requirement for ordination is not a Master of Divinity. Many of them would have an undergraduate degree in a Bachelor of Theology or even a BA in religion. That's a huge difference. And that's adaptable according to different regions. And that is just one example of what what is adaptable. However, that work is not complete. You are the focus for our conversation today is on part 6. The part 7 is being developed, and part 6 and 7 will all go to General Conference in 2028. This was not taken up for action by the General Conference back in April and May, because knowing that regionalization is before the conference, the standing committee decided not to put this through the process of for a vote, and all this will go to General Conference in 2028. So what we need to do now is to get the feedback from all the annual conferences. Bear in mind that this is not the first round of conversation. A few years ago, when the draft was, an earlier draft was made, we had a conversation during our annual conference session, and that those feedback were given to the standing committee as well. Okay, so the important thing is for us to hear back from all of you, particularly what are some places that you in your review that you would encourage the standing committee to move it to section 7, because this should be adaptable. It is not essential for the entire worldwide church. So I'm going to end at this point, turn it back to my sister Micheal to facilitate the conversation. So, Sister Micheal, back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Brother Jeffrey. As you can see, Jeffrey has been a member of the United Methodist Church and a part of the connectional relationship for quite some time, and that knowledge that he brings to the conversation is very important. I have been reviewing the part 6, and what we're talking about is the sections 1 and all the way through to the bottom, wherever it ends. It goes on and on and on. But we really are talking about the organization of the church, the things that, as Jeffrey outlined, that are allowable and are not allowable. But what I also want to point out is that we're not talking about us being better than another part of our church. What we're saying is, in the Philippines, culture, a way of life, experience needs something different than maybe what we need in Spokane, Washington, or what's happening for our siblings in Africa is very different than it is for our friends that live in the San Francisco Bay Area. So please go into this with that context, because when we talk about regionalization, we're not talking about what is better than the U.S. or less than the U.S. We're talking about what will be better and allow that inclusiveness and freedom for our siblings in whatever context that they live. And the time for telling people what to do in their context is over. And that's what we really, as delegates, went to Charlotte to make sure that we would make that happen for our siblings in a way to honor their heritage and the way that they live. But I will draw us now to the questions. The first question is, what elements of the proposed new part 6 do not reflect essentials for a worldwide connection of the UMC and or are not applicable in your context and mission? So there are things like, I was reading, and Jeffrey, you might have to guide us, but in this area here, we voted in that deaconesses would be able to perform the sacraments. Well, that's something that's new. So would that land here, Jeffrey, or would that be something that would go to part 7?
That's a very good question, Sister Micheal. just one correction. It's not
Yeah.
deaconess, it's deacon order.
Deacon order.
The
Thank you.
order of deacon, because we are not familiar with the language of deaconess.
Yeah.
But deaconess is very important for the context, particularly of Philippines, and certain other contexts in Africa. So I think it is a very valuable question and feedback, because also in some contexts, the order of deacon, which has become very important for us in the US, are not being implemented in other parts of our worldwide connection.
Right.
And they're still trying to figure out how to work on that order. And so I think it is an important question to raise back to the committee as we talk about the orders, whether or not the orders is something that needs to be adaptable for the different contexts, and move it to those sections of the where orders can even be adapted, and orders can, each different region can decide whether or not they want to implement those orders. Secondly, let me also say that I have also been involved in the study of ministry under the auspices of GBHEM. There will be a new study group being formed that will also take up these questions about the ordering of ministry.
And then in the question right now that we have before us, thank you, Amy, it reads, under the structure of regionalization, what happens to the jurisdictions? Is the USA one region and one jurisdiction, or do we keep the jurisdictions within the new region? So how I understand this, and again, I'm going to call on my brother Jeffrey. We've been doing this back and forth. What we would be is the United States would be separate from the other conferences across the connection. And we then might have to look at how we have set up the boundaries of our jurisdictions. You know, disaffiliation has done that in some ways, where we have one bishop that was now serving two different conferences. You know, we may look at those kinds of changes may take place just out of mission focus, geography, those kinds of things. But we will we as the United States will have our own. I don't think the word is jurisdiction, though. Am I right, Jeffrey? We will just be. Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
Yeah, we will, if ratification pass, we will be a region like all the other regions. The language of central conferences will also go away. Africa Central, the Philippine Central Conference will no longer be known as the Philippine Central Conference. It will change to the Philippine Regional Conference. The US will be referred to as a regional conference. There are 4 regional conferences in the continent of Africa. This is where it gets complicated, friends, because we are one nation. It is, and because of the national identity, the decision is to keep the US as one region. But we are retaining, Amy, we are retaining jurisdiction. We cannot do away with jurisdiction, because without the passage of regionalization, the US cannot change its structure. Secondly, as we were looking at the need for jurisdiction, what we were also hearing from other places, particularly from the continent of Africa, that we should not remove at this time from our organizational structure jurisdictions. The U.S. may continue to be divided as one region into jurisdictions.
Mhm.
But this will also allow one of the central conferences or more of the central conferences in Africa, because of their geographical nightmare,
Yeah.
traveling from in the same central conference from one area to another is a huge process.
Yeah.
So our African siblings are also thinking that they may need to be subdivided into jurisdictions in order to do ministry even more effectively. So we are still in a process in flux, and once ratification is passed, there will be a committee, a task force set up to look into all this and make proposals to the 2028 General Conference. So this is where we are right now.
Thank you for saying that, Jeffrey. I was in a meeting with our siblings from the Congo. And when they tore apart the geography of the Congo, as well as the variety of ministries and language, not just even, you say Congo and you think, oh, maybe they all speak the same language. No, they don't. And so even that in itself, they were to look at it as one jurisdiction might not be beneficial to them, but looking at one piece of the Congo with another piece of the continent would be better. So jurisdictions are really a United States construct in some sense. When you think about the jurisdictions the way we think about them, with Western jurisdiction, we look at our United States map and we can pretty much see why we call it the Western jurisdiction. But when you're working in other countries, it's very, very different. Very different. Very good question. Thank you, Amy. Anything else that anyone wants to add about context and mission from part 6? Most of this that I'm looking at here is about the function of the local church. It's about the definition, the responsibility for the community, the pastoral changes, church membership. So those things I don't think have much change in them, except for the areas where we did do things around when we ended the disaffiliation policy, so that's gone. Climate justice legislation, which we did add in, might change the way we look at some of our responsibilities to the community. And the ordination ban is across everything. So those things, the language, the wording might change in those areas, but I don't see, unless someone else has done a little deeper dive than me, if you have had a chance to look at it, does anyone see anything that they think should move to the new section? Okay. Question number 2 is, what essentially connectional elements are missing in the proposed new part 6?
Micheal?
Yes,
Myrna has a question.
Oh, I didn't see her. Oh, it's in the chat. Can you clarify what annotations at the end of each section in the DCA section mean? For example, V112340002.
Good question, Myrna. That is merely an indication that the paragraph 234, some of that will be moved to part 7, because some of that is adaptable. For example, if you go to paragraph 315 or 316 in the DCA, you will also see that there is a annotation that says that some of it will be in part 7. I mentioned the educational requirement. It is not in the DCA right now because those will come up in part 7 as adaptable.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that question, Myrna. I'm sure I didn't even notice that. So thank you for that question. So essentially, again, question number 2, what essentially connectional elements are missing in the proposed new part 6? Does anyone have anything to raise up as it relates to question number 2? Any thoughts? I see that commissioning, paragraph 321 is slotted or slated to move to section 7. The commissioning, the act publicly, that's being moved, it looks like. Service of provisional members. So there's a lot that is actually moving. But Jeffrey, when it has the section 7 with no numbers or anything, does that means it's in limbo?
It is in some ways in limbo because that the section have not been fully put together.
Okay.
But you are right when you pick out on those things about commissioning and all that. Because if the qualifications and how orders are done in different contexts, different regions can decide how they want to order their ministries. And so what may apply to the US may not necessarily be something that they want to continue to do they want to do in the different different regions. And so those will be adaptable for each of the regions.
Mm-hmm. And then if you want to look at paragraph 324, that also is an area where it goes on, where it is also left open. But based on Jeffrey's conversation about the order of deacon and all of those, that being able to do sacraments and that, this will ultimately reflect some change.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So what you find now in paragraph 324, in paragraph 324 are essentially both 324 and 325 are essentially those that is applicable to all the regions. Those if you look again, the questions, the historic examination for admission into food connection, those are historic Wesley questions, and those are not adaptable. No regions can decide. Here are some questions that we can ask. Here are some questions that we are not going to ask, because that is part of the tradition. So, but other matters can be adaptable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then most of those, until you get to paragraph 335, relate to the questions, relate to the expectations of leaders, clergy leaders, and deacon. And then we get to unauthorized conduct. And again, I don't see any major changes, but it says here in number 4, that no pastor shall hold a religious service within the bounds of a pastoral change other than the one to which appointed without the consent of the pastor of the charge or the district superintendent. And it looks as if that will be moved from where it is now to section 7.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So, and then as we continue to scroll down, you see that nothing has changed there until we get to, let's see, mentoring, evaluation, continuing education, and sabbatical leave. And so there will be, looks like all of this section 1 and 2, which is mentors, is moving to section 7 as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then evaluation is moving. Continuing education and spiritual growth looks like it's moving, and sabbatical leave is moving. I'm looking at my copy. I'm on page 33. I just left page 33 and it was on page 34, paragraph 341, sabbatical leave. And I've just downloaded all of this, so I don't have the actual DCA in front of me. Okay. Okay, thank you, Myrna. And then changes of conference relationship, which is the next section. Again, the Book of Discipline does have crossover in so many areas that as you read it, is really good to kind of figure out where things are. And this here talks about changes in the conference relationship when a change in it is deemed necessary or desirable by a clergy. So this, again, a lot of this section is the relationship between clergy, their conference, their jurisdiction, and the church. Okay. Voluntary leaves, retirement, leave of absence, all of this language. And it to me, it looks like up through number 3, those paragraphs are moving to section 7 as well. All right. So again, we have the questions before us that we put together, but I've just been kind of going through this with you just so that you can get a feel and highlight maybe the areas that will move to section 7. And I suggest you do that so that when you go back and look at it again with the highlighted areas, you'll see how much is coming out and how much will be left in section 6. Okay. But is there anything right now that anybody can respond to question number 2 before we move to question number 3 in our last 15 minutes? And then Jeffrey and I would really like to hear from you. How are you feeling about all this? I know this is a fast wash over everything. So just take a few minutes to think about that while I read question number 3. What inconsistencies or inaccuracies are found, in the proposed new part 6 and are thus in need of correction? And that may not be something we can answer today, but it would be great to hear from you in that area as you begin to see what's being pulled apart. Yeah, a lot of this is going to 7. And then there are some key points that are not. The complaint procedure is going to 7. Okay. And I'm already down.
Our current book of discipline is also very convoluted. and there are repetitions. And so the work that has been done is to try to reduce the repetitions, the redundancies. And hopefully after 2028, after ratification is finalized, all the different regions will have their own book of disciplines with all the essentials of the general book of discipline that cannot be adapted will be part of that. But then different regions will have their own sections of some of these that are adaptable, and how we operationalize the book of discipline for our own context.
And then one last thing at the bottom is about suspensions, and that would move to section 7. And now we voted in, and it was G-Corps was appointed to be a part of suspension processes as it relates to bishops and ordained ministries as well. So G-Corps will now be a part of that process. So there may be some language changes there as well. And then the question is, will there be also a chance at annual conference to discuss these questions as a body or in sections? The annual conference committee is discussing how we can create space for us to have these kind of conversations together as a collective at the annual conference. But we are also having these conversations ahead of time so that it's not fresh and new, and that those conversations will not just start from a beginning, that they will start from people having had an opportunity to read and to come up with questions that they might want to share in a collective process. Yeah, Bishop Sandy is very, very much wanting us to have a conversation as a conference, but realize that not everybody gets to come to annual conference. And so making sure, as Jeffrey outlined and Bishop Sandy in the beginning, take these questions back, take the section that is, this section 6, print it. I was able to pull it up and give it to people to read. And so that they can begin to have discussions, or you can begin to have discussions in your churches and have impact questions. How is this going to impact this or that? How do you feel about this or that? This section really does speak to you among us who are clergy. And so I think it's really important that you take the time to live with it and make sure this is something. One thing that I learned as a delegate is that a lot of times, this is the document, this is the Bible that I lived with, and it's huge. But what I realized is a lot of times people come to General Conference and have never read or understood. I was one of them. How the church functions and the multiple layers of how we get to the book of discipline that we have to live with for a long period of time. And so, and it was because we're all busy, and it's a daunting book to read and all of that. But take the time, because I think this is the time that we can change language and we can make a contribution, as Jeffrey said, to the outcomes.
And Myrna, your comment, will there be a chance at annual conference to discuss these questions as a body or in sections? You are also a veteran of General Conference. You know that this process does not end until it is codified and printed in the Book of Discipline.
Right.
And so whatever legislative proposals that come up for 2018, the delegates to 2028, the delegates to the General Conference, in working in their legislative sessions, can still ask for amendments, for changes to be made.
Yeah.
So while we have been asked to provide feedback by the end of December because the standing committee is meeting in January, it does not end the process. Part 6 and part 7 will all come together, and then part 6 and 7, I believe, will be recirculated to all annual conferences for review before they even will go to the 2028 General Conference. So this process is ongoing.
And then Becky has a question. Will local pastor requirements and voting privileges be regionalized when I guess when we get to the place of regionalization? Is that?
Currently it is not, and I believe those are matters that are applicable throughout the system because of voting rights, and some of that are even codified in the constitutional section. So those will be much more difficult, and because from my perspective, this is an issue of equity and justice, and we should not be giving privileges, this kind of important privileges to one region and not the other.
And then let's see, do we have any form of working document with many of the new portions of the Book of Discipline in the meantime before 2028? I believe the current Book of Discipline that 2020, 2024 will be out in January is what my pre-order says.
That's right.
Yeah. At the 2028 General Conference is accurate. That is with ratifications of regions would happen, but the changes to a regional BOC wouldn't happen until the first regional conference happens, whenever that would be.
Sorry, that didn't make sense. I had a lot of typos.
Okay.
So the ratification of the regional plan would occur at the 2028 General Conference. But at that conference, we would not be dealing with the U.S. Book of Discipline. That would have to happen at a separate conference, correct?
Matthew, ratification process will end after this annual conference cycle. The votes will be certified not by General Conference, but by the Council of Bishops. In some places, in some regions, their annual conferences have begun. They are beginning to take the vote for regionalization.
Okay. So
the US will be doing that in May and in June of next year. And once all the annual conferences have done that, the vote will go to the Council of Bishops, and the Council of Bishops is the one that ratifies the vote. Okay?
And then, so the second part of that question is, when it comes to creating or finalizing our next regional Book of Discipline, that wouldn't actually happen until after 2028.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
There will be a convening regional conference for the U.S. Church sometime. We have no idea when. And it is the regional conference that can decide on those adaptable sections and not take the time of the entire General Conference to do that work. Okay? as those of you who have attended General Conference know that we spend too much time to do the work of the U.S. Church, because everything in the Book of Discipline applies to the U.S. Church and can only be changed at the General Conference. The retirement, the West Path new clergy retirement plan, that has nothing to do with the rest of the church. And we spend so much time needing to do that because it can only be passed at General Conference. Many of those work would be diverted to regional conferences.
Mm-hmm. And then General Conference we would come together as a connectional church to talk about the bigger issues of ministry, discipleship, and church. And that will change General Conference mightily.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, we spend a whole week just discussing what we're going to do the following week.
Yep.
And a lot of our siblings cannot even participate. They try to participate in those conversations because I was on a committee, but I was on the society committee, and a lot of the societal things that we were discussing, they don't even understand why we're discussing them and why we're spending a whole week to discuss them. So it really became evident to me how American-centric the Book of Discipline was when I was in a space with our siblings across the pond. Yeah. These are great questions. You guys this is great. There's another question from Myrna. Will there be restrictions on the frequency of when the regional conference can meet? 4 years, shorter intervals? We're a quadrennium. We have a quadrennium calendar at the moment, but I guess the pandemic showed us that doesn't matter very much. But Jeffrey, do you have any insight on that? You're muted.
Currently, jurisdictional conferences and central conferences meet after a general conference. So by implication, they are also on a quadrennial cycle.
Well, I'm
And,
asking about the regional conferences, Jeffrey, not the jurisdictional nor the central.
Right. Because of the change of language from central conferences to regional conferences, it will no longer just be a U.S. matter. Because if all of us move to the structure of regional conferences, it will be in the Book of Discipline in terms of the frequency of the regional conferences, and whether or not regional conferences will have flexibility to organize itself to determine the frequency of its regional conferences. Unfortunately, that will all be in the Constitution because it is a constitutional matter.
So I guess the answer is no.
Not currently.
Not yet.
Changing the structure is not easy.
Yeah, I know. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Myrna. Any other questions, comments, thoughts that you want Jeffrey and I to take away from this gathering? And thank you again for your time. We're getting close to the end of our time with you. Any concerns? No?
What's the best way to send further thoughts? Send it to Micheal and me.
Yeah.
Because we are the ones who will be collating the conversations and sending it over to the executive committee of the standing committee.
And then also the bishop will be in dialogue with us as
Yep.
well, so we can share information. But I think again, it's important that you read it. And know when go down to where Myrna pointed out, thank you, Myrna, for where those sections are going to be split off and highlight that and just really kind of live with it for a minute, because it is daunting to read it in just the hour that we've had. You need to sit down with it for a minute. And remember the 3 questions. If you can scroll down in the beginning of the meeting, or I hate calling this the meeting, the beginning of this gathering, and highlight those 3 questions, or write them down, whichever, or take a photo of them. This is also an opportunity to have these conversations with your congregation members, your folks in your churches, so that they have a better understanding of also the Book of Discipline and the changes that will come about or not, and also how this whole process happens within the church. It's like a question. 2 new questions. Can you translate the documents into other languages? I think they were thinking about doing that, EUNEC, already in a couple of languages. I just don't know what the languages are. I know Spanish was one.
General conference documents are always translated into a few languages. So French is one of those because of the francophone in the continent of Africa. Kiswahili is another one. So I'm not remembering what may be some others, but Eunice, if you're asking them more in relation to the Tongan language, unfortunately that has not been translated into Tongan. But if you want to translate into Tongan,
I was just going to say,
the general church will appreciate that.
We would greatly appreciate that. And then Myrna has
You are so funny.
Myrna has reminded us that the sections start on page 733 of the DCA link that you received, and then there's a link right below that.
And
Great.
friends, we'll make sure that the recording of this, as well as all of these resources that have been shared, are up on the conference website. So we'll make sure it's easy to get back to, and we'll send it out to all the participants next week, probably.
Great. Well, thank you very much, all of you. I know you need to run. I need to run to my board meeting too. So
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you.